From the sun-kissed banks of the mighty Nile, where ancient gods watched over pharaohs and secrets blossomed in the desert heat, we invite you into a world of profound passion and impossible choices. Imagine a woman, cloaked in disguise, navigating the treacherous currents of palace intrigue, her very identity a whisper in the wind. But when a forbidden love ignites amidst the shadows of diplomatic deception, her world shatters. She must then choose: surrender to a dangerous passion that defies all boundaries, or sacrifice her very heart to save a kingdom teetering on the brink of ruin. Every stolen glance, every whispered word becomes a perilous step towards a destiny where duty and desire collide. Welcome, cherished viewers, to a saga of profound emotion and thrilling suspense. Before we begin, tell us, where are you tuning in from today, and what draws you most to the enchanting world of historical romances? Memphis, 1550, before the birth of Christ. The ancient capital of Egypt awakened beneath a crimson dawn that painted the mighty Nile in shades of molten gold. In the heart of the royal palace, where pharaohs had ruled for millennia, shadows danced across limestone walls adorned with hieroglyphs that whispered secrets of gods and mortals. The royal scriptorium lay shrouded in pre-dawn silence, its papyrus scrolls and reed pens waiting like faithful servants for their master's touch. Through the narrow window, the first rays of Ra's chariot pierced the darkness, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny spirits in the sacred air. Hatshepsut moved through the corridors with the practiced stealth of one who had learned to hide in plain sight. Her sandaled feet made no sound against the polished stone floors as she approached her sanctuary of knowledge. To the world, she was Senenmut, a young scribe of modest birth but exceptional talent. To herself, she remained the daughter of a man who had dared to educate a woman in a world that forbade such dreams. In the small chamber adjacent to the scriptorium, Merit waited with the tools of deception that had become as familiar as breathing. The older woman's weathered hands moved with gentle efficiency, binding linen strips across Hatshepsut's chest with the tenderness of a mother preparing her child for battle. "Tighter today," Hatshepsut whispered, her voice barely audible in the sacred hush of dawn. "The Hittite delegation arrives, and I cannot afford even the slightest suspicion." Merit's dark eyes reflected years of shared secrets as she pulled the bindings secure. "Your father would be proud," she murmured, her fingers smoothing the masculine tunic over the concealed curves. "But he would also worry. This masquerade grows more dangerous with each passing season." Hatshepsut straightened her shoulders, transforming her natural grace into the confident bearing of a young man who belonged in the halls of power. She deepened her voice, practicing the inflections that had become second nature. "Knowledge is power, Merit. And today, Egypt needs all the power she can gather." The transformation complete, she entered the scriptorium as the sun painted the chamber in shades of amber and gold. The familiar scent of papyrus and ink welcomed her like an old friend, while the weight of her father's hidden medical scrolls seemed to pulse against her consciousness from their secret hiding place beneath the floorstones. Her fingers traced the edge of a particular scroll, and memory transported her to another time, another life. She was 15 again, sitting cross-legged beside her father in this very chamber, her young mind absorbing knowledge like the desert sand drinks the Nile's flood. "Knowledge is power, my daughter," her father's voice echoed across the years, his gentle hands guiding hers as they ground herbs into healing powders. "But medical knowledge is life itself. The gods have blessed you with a mind that can hold both the wisdom of scribes and the secrets of healers. Promise me you will use both to serve Egypt." The memory shimmered like a mirage, bringing with it the phantom scent of myrrh and frankincense, the feel of ancient papyrus beneath her fingertips as he taught her to read the medical texts that few men and no women were permitted to study. Hidden beneath the floor of this very chamber lay those precious scrolls, their secrets more valuable than all the gold in Pharaoh's treasury. "I promise, father," she had whispered on that terrible night when fever claimed him, her tears falling onto hands that would never again guide her learning. "I will serve Egypt with everything you have taught me." The sound of approaching footsteps shattered the reverie, and Hatshepsut quickly composed herself as Amenemheb entered the scriptorium. The chief of scribes moved with the dignity of a man who had served 3 pharaohs, his silver-streaked beard and intelligent eyes commanding respect from all who encountered him. Senenmut, his voice carried the authority of decades spent in service to the crown. "Today brings great responsibility. The Hittite delegation has arrived in Memphis, and Pharaoh has chosen you to serve as primary translator for the negotiations." Hatshepsut bowed her head in acknowledgement, her heart racing with a mixture of pride and terror. "I am honored by Pharaoh's trust, Master Amenemheb. I will not disappoint him." The older man's gaze lingered on her face for a moment longer than necessary, and she wondered, not for the first time, how much he truly suspected about the young scribe who had appeared in his scriptorium 13 years ago with knowledge that seemed to exceed his supposed humble origins. "See that you do not," Amenemheb said softly, but his tone carried warmth rather than warning. "The Hittites are a proud people, and their language holds subtleties that have confounded lesser scholars. Your expertise will be crucial to Egypt's interests." As if summoned by the gods themselves, the sound of horns echoed across the palace courtyard, announcing the formal arrival of the foreign delegation. Hatshepsut felt her pulse quicken as she gathered her writing materials, the familiar weight of reed pens and ink pots grounding her in the reality of her assumed identity. The great audience hall of the palace had been transformed into a theatre of diplomatic grandeur. Columns painted with scenes of Pharaoh's victories stretched toward a ceiling decorated with stars that seemed to dance in the flickering light of countless oil lamps. The air was thick with incense and the whispered conversations of courtiers who had gathered to witness this historic meeting. Hatshepsut took her position among the other scribes, her masculine robes blending seamlessly with those of her colleagues. From this vantage point, she could observe without being observed, a skill that had served her well throughout her years of deception. The massive doors of the hall swung open with ceremonial grandeur, and the Hittite delegation entered like figures from a dream. Their clothing spoke of a civilization both foreign and sophisticated, with rich fabrics dyed in colors that seemed to capture the essence of distant mountains and foreign skies. Geometric patterns adorned their robes, and their jewelry bore the distinctive craftsmanship of a people who had mastered the arts of war and diplomacy in equal measure. But it was their leader who commanded every eye in the chamber, including Hatshepsut's. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, tall and commanding, his presence filling the vast space as surely as the Nile filled its banks during the annual flood. His hair, the color of burnished bronze, caught the lamplight as he walked, and when he turned to acknowledge Pharaoh's greeting, Hatshepsut felt her breath catch in her throat. His eyes were the color of storm clouds over the Mediterranean, grey-blue and penetrating, holding an intelligence that seemed to see through the very souls of those around him. When his gaze swept across the assembled scribes, it paused for the briefest moment on her face, and she felt a jolt of recognition that had nothing to do with previous acquaintance and everything to do with the meeting of kindred minds. "I am Suppiluliuma." His voice carried the authority of nobility as he addressed Pharaoh Thutmose in accented but flawless Egyptian. "I come bearing the greetings of my king and the hope that our peoples might find common ground in these troubled times." The formal presentations continued with the elaborate ritual that diplomacy demanded, but Hatshepsut found herself studying the Hittite leader with the intensity of a scholar examining a particularly complex text. There was something about his bearing, the way he held himself, that spoke of more than mere ambassadorial rank. His knowledge of Egyptian court protocol seemed unusually thorough, and when he gestured toward the painted columns depicting military victories, His observations carried the insight of someone well-versed in the strategies of war. "Your artisans capture the essence of battle with remarkable skill," Suppiluliuma commented to Pharaoh, his eyes studying the painted scenes with what appeared to be professional interest. The positioning of the chariots in this depiction suggests a deep understanding of battlefield tactics. Hatshepsut's scholarly mind noted the comment with interest. Most ambassadors would have offered generic praise for the artistic beauty of the paintings. This man spoke like someone who had studied warfare, not merely observed it from the safety of diplomatic distance. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the actual negotiations began, Hatshepsut found herself called forward to take her position as translator. The great table of polished cedar had been arranged with scrolls and writing materials, creating an intimate space for discussion within the vastness of the audience hall. The matter of trade routes through the northern territories requires delicate consideration, Pharaoh began, his words carrying the weight of empire. Our merchants have long traveled these paths, but recent disturbances have made passage dangerous. Hatshepsut translated with fluid precision, her years of study allowing her to capture not just the words, but the subtle implications behind them. As she spoke the Hittite tongue, she noticed Suppiluliuma's eyes fix upon her with increased attention, as if her pronunciation had revealed something unexpected. "Your translator possesses remarkable facility with our language," Suppiluliuma observed, directing his comment to Pharaoh but keeping his gaze on Hatshepsut. "Such mastery typically requires years of immersion in Hittite culture. Or Senenmut is among our most gifted scholars," Amenemheb interjected smoothly, stepping slightly forward in a gesture that seemed protective. "His dedication to learning has brought honor to our scriptorium." The negotiations continued through the morning, with discussions of tribute, territorial boundaries, and mutual defense agreements. Hatshepsut found herself impressed by Suppiluliuma's diplomatic skill, but also increasingly puzzled by certain aspects of his knowledge. His understanding of Egyptian military positions along the northern borders seemed unusually detailed for a trade negotiator, and his questions about palace security procedures struck her as oddly specific. As the formal session drew to a close, the court began to disperse for the midday meal. Hatshepsut was gathering her writing materials when a commotion near the chamber's entrance caught her attention. Nefertiti, the most celebrated beauty of Pharaoh's court, had positioned herself where the departing Hittites could not fail to notice her. The woman was a vision of calculated perfection, her elaborate wig adorned with gold ornaments that caught the light with every movement of her head. Her pleated linen dress, so fine it was nearly transparent, had been arranged to display her figure to maximum advantage, while her jewelry spoke of wealth and status that few could match. "Lord Suppiluliuma," Nefertiti's voice carried the musical quality that had charmed countless men of the court. "Surely a man of your evident culture would appreciate the gardens of our palace. I would be honored to serve as your guide." Hatshepsut watched this exchange with the detached interest of a scholar observing social customs, but she was surprised to notice that Suppiluliuma's response seemed politely distant. His eyes acknowledged Nefertiti's beauty with the appreciation any man might show, but they did not linger with the fascination she clearly expected. "You are most gracious, Lady Nefertiti," he replied with diplomatic courtesy. "Perhaps when the demands of negotiation permit such leisure." It was then that Nefertiti's gaze shifted to the scribe's table, and Hatshepsut saw something dangerous flicker in those coal-lined eyes. The court beauty had noticed where Suppiluliuma's attention had been focused during the negotiations, and the realization that a mere scribe had commanded more of the foreign prince's interest than her own considerable charms was clearly not sitting well. "How fascinating that our humble scribes should prove so captivating to distinguished visitors," Nefertiti observed, her tone carrying just enough edge to make her displeasure clear. "One might wonder what qualities in a simple scholar could prove so intriguing." Hatshepsut felt the weight of scrutiny settling upon her like a physical presence. She kept her expression carefully neutral, but inwardly cursed the attention that her competence had drawn. In a world where women were expected to remain invisible, even a man who stood out too much could find himself in dangerous territory. The afternoon brought a welcome respite from the intensity of formal negotiations. Hatshepsut retreated to the palace gardens, seeking solitude among the lotus pools and date palms that provided a green oasis within the limestone walls. The scent of jasmine hung heavy in the air, while the gentle splash of fountains created a symphony of peace that soothed her troubled thoughts. She was seated on a marble bench beside a reflecting pool, reviewing her notes from the morning session when the sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Suppiluliuma emerged from behind a screen of flowering shrubs, his formal diplomatic robes replaced by a simple tunic that somehow made him appear even more imposing. "I hope I am not intruding," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been absent during the formal proceedings. "I find myself in need of quiet contemplation after the complexities of diplomatic discourse. The gardens belong to all who seek peace within them," Hatshepsut replied carefully, rising to offer the appropriate bow to a man of his rank. "I was merely reviewing the day's proceedings to ensure accuracy in my records." Suppiluliuma moved closer, his eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Your dedication to precision is admirable. In my experience, such attention to detail often reflects a mind capable of grasping complexities that escape others." They fell into conversation with surprising ease, discussing the philosophical implications of the texts they had translated, the challenges of capturing meaning across cultural boundaries, and the eternal human quest for understanding. Hatshepsut found herself drawn into discourse, more stimulating than any she had experienced since her father's death, her mind awakening to possibilities she had almost forgotten existed. "You speak of knowledge as if it were a living thing," Suppiluliuma observed as they walked slowly along the garden paths. "Most scholars treat learning as a collection of facts to be catalogued and stored. You seem to understand that true wisdom breathes and grows." "Knowledge without understanding is merely decoration," Hatshepsut replied, momentarily forgetting to maintain the careful distance her disguise required. "My father taught me that wisdom comes not from memorizing texts, but from grasping the connections between all things." The words had escaped before she could stop them, revealing more of her true thoughts than was safe. She saw Suppiluliuma's eyes sharpen with interest and realized she had made a mistake that could prove costly. "Your father sounds like a man of exceptional insight," he said quietly. "Such teachers are rare treasures. You were fortunate to have his guidance." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Hatshepsut knew she should return to her duties. But something about this man's presence made her reluctant to break the spell of intellectual communion that had settled between them. It was then that Katie appeared at the garden's entrance, his muscular frame and military bearing marking him unmistakably as one of Pharaoh's guards. His scarred face bore an expression of concern as he approached their secluded corner of the garden. "Senenmut," his deep voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Master Amenemheb requests your presence in the scriptorium. There are documents requiring immediate attention." But as Katie drew closer, Hatshepsut noticed something else in his expression, a troubled quality that spoke of more than routine administrative matters. "There have been reports from the outer provinces," Katie continued, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Suppiluliuma before returning to her face. "Villages along the northern trade routes. People falling ill with fever that burns like fire, followed by madness that no healer can cure. The symptoms are unlike anything our physicians have encountered." Hatshepsut felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. Her father's medical training had taught her to recognize the signs of diseases, both natural and unnatural, and what Katie described sounded ominous indeed. "How many villages?" she asked, her scholarly mind already analyzing the implications. 7, at last count, Katie replied grimly, "and the number grows with each messenger that arrives." As they made their way back toward the palace proper, Hatshepsut was acutely aware of Suppiluliuma walking beside them, his expression thoughtful but unreadable. She wondered what a Hittite ambassador might make of reports of mysterious illness in Egyptian territories, and whether such information might prove valuable to foreign interests. The scriptorium had been transformed in her absence. Additional oil lamps cast dancing shadows across tables now covered with maps and correspondence, while Amenemheb moved between the documents with the focused intensity of a general planning a campaign. "Ah, Senenmut!" The chief of scribes looked up as they entered. "Lord Suppiluliuma has requested access to historical records regarding trade agreements between our peoples. I thought your expertise might prove valuable in locating the relevant documents." Hatshepsut bowed acknowledgement, but she noticed how Amenemheb's eyes lingered on her face with an expression that seemed to carry layers of meaning. The older man had always been protective of his scribes, but lately she had sensed something more in his regard, a watchfulness that suggested suspicions carefully held in check. "I would be honored to assist," she replied, moving toward the archive chambers where the oldest scrolls were stored. As she worked alongside Suppiluliuma in the lamplight, translating ancient agreements and explaining the historical context of various treaties, Hatshepsut became increasingly aware of his remarkable knowledge of Egyptian affairs. His questions were too precise, his understanding of military terminology too sophisticated for a simple trade negotiator. "This passage regarding garrison positions along the northern border," Suppiluliuma observed, pointing to a section of hieroglyphic text. "The translation seems to suggest strategic placement beyond mere trade route protection." Hatshepsut paused in her writing, studying his face in the flickering lamplight. "You have considerable insight into military matters for a diplomatic envoy." Their eyes met across the ancient papyrus, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with unspoken questions. Suppiluliuma's gaze held hers with an intensity that made her heart race, while something in his expression suggested he was wrestling with secrets of his own. "Knowledge of military affairs is essential for any diplomat who hopes to negotiate from a position of understanding," he replied carefully. "One cannot discuss territorial boundaries without grasping their strategic implications." The explanation was reasonable, but something in his tone suggested layers of meaning that remained hidden. Hatshepsut found herself studying his hands as he handled the ancient scrolls, noting the calluses that spoke of weapons training rather than scholarly pursuits, the way his fingers moved with the precision of someone accustomed to handling more than diplomatic documents. As the evening deepened and the palace settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Amenemheb approached their table with a scroll that seemed to glow with particular significance in the lamplight. "Lord Suppiluliuma," the chief of scribes said formally, "I have located a text that may interest you. It is written in ancient Akkadian, a diplomatic language that predates current treaties by several centuries. However, the translation has proven challenging even for our most accomplished scholars." Suppiluliuma accepted the scroll with interest, unrolling it carefully to reveal lines of cuneiform script that seemed to dance in the flickering light. Hatshepsut watched his face as he studied the ancient writing, noting the way his eyes moved across the symbols with the confidence of someone well-versed in multiple languages. "This appears to be a treaty between the Hittite kingdom and Egyptian pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom," he observed after several minutes of study. "The language is archaic, but the content seems to address territorial disputes that may have relevance to our current negotiations." "Indeed," Amenemheb agreed, but his eyes were fixed on Hatshepsut rather than their distinguished guest. Perhaps Senenmut might attempt a translation. His facility with ancient languages has proven exceptional in the past. Hatshepsut felt the weight of expectation settling upon her shoulders like a ceremonial cloak. This was clearly a test, though whether it was intended to challenge her abilities or expose some hidden truth remained unclear. She accepted the scroll with steady hands, though her heart was racing with the implications of what was being asked. The cuneiform script was indeed archaic, its symbols worn by age and handling until they seemed more like shadows than letters. But her father's training had included exposure to the oldest forms of written language, and gradually the meaning began to emerge from the ancient marks. The text speaks of boundaries established through divine mandate, she began, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the chamber. The Hittite king acknowledges Egyptian sovereignty over territories south of the Great River, while Egypt recognizes Hittite dominion over the mountain passes that control access to the northern trade routes. As she continued the translation, revealing clauses that addressed everything from tribute payments to mutual defense agreements, Hatshepsut became aware that both Amenemheb and Suppiluliuma were watching her with expressions of amazement that bordered on suspicion. "Remarkable," Suppiluliuma murmured when she finished. "Your understanding of archaic Akkadian surpasses that of scholars who have devoted their entire lives to such studies. Where did you acquire such expertise?" The question hung in the air like incense smoke, heavy with implications that made Hatshepsut's pulse quicken with alarm. She had allowed her knowledge to shine too brightly, revealing capabilities that exceeded what might be expected from a scribe of humble origins. "My father was a devoted teacher," she replied carefully, hoping her voice did not betray the fear that was growing within her. "He believed that true scholarship required understanding the roots from which all knowledge grows." Amenemheb stepped forward, his expression carrying a mixture of pride and concern that made Hatshepsut realize how much the older man had suspected about her true nature. "Senenmut's dedication to learning has always been exceptional," the chief of scribes said firmly. "His father's teachings clearly planted seeds that have borne remarkable fruit." But even as Amenemheb spoke in her defense, Hatshepsut could see that Suppiluliuma's interest had been thoroughly aroused. The Hittite's grey-blue eyes studied her face with the intensity of a hunter who has caught sight of unusual prey, and she realized that her performance had created as many dangers as it had resolved. As the night deepened and the formal session drew to a close, Merit appeared at the chamber's entrance like a guardian spirit summoned by necessity. The older woman's eyes met Hatshepsut's across the lamplit space, and the urgent concern in that familiar gaze sent a chill of warning through her heart. "Master Senenmut," Merit said with careful formality, "there are matters in your quarters requiring immediate attention." Hatshepsut recognized the coded warning that had served them well through years of careful deception. Something had happened. Some threat had emerged that required immediate consultation away from curious eyes and listening ears. "Of course," she replied, rising from the table with movements that she hoped appeared casual rather than urgent. "Lord Suppiluliuma, I trust the documents have provided the information you sought." "Indeed they have," he replied, but his eyes remained fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "I find myself hoping for further opportunities to benefit from such scholarly expertise." As Hatshepsut gathered her writing materials and prepared to depart, she felt the weight of Suppiluliuma's gaze following her every movement. There was something in his expression that spoke of puzzles being assembled, of questions forming that could prove dangerous to answer. "Until tomorrow's negotiations," she said with a bow that she hoped conveyed appropriate respect without revealing the turmoil that churned within her heart. But as she walked away from the lamplight and into the shadows of the corridor, Merit's urgent whisper confirmed her worst fears. "Nefertiti has been asking questions," the older woman murmured as they moved quickly through the darkened palace. "She has spoken with servants, inquired about your background, your family. Her interest has attracted attention from others who might prove less sympathetic to mysteries they cannot solve. Hatshepsut felt the walls of her carefully constructed world beginning to tremble like a house built on sand when the Nile floods. For 13 years, she had maintained her deception through careful planning and constant vigilance. But now forces beyond her control were beginning to converge in ways that threatened everything she had built. Behind them, in the lamplight of the scriptorium, Suppiluliuma remained seated at the table covered with ancient scrolls, his eyes fixed on the doorway through which the mysterious scribe had disappeared. Something about the young man had captured his attention in ways that went beyond mere intellectual appreciation, and he found himself determined to solve the puzzle that Senenmut represented. The game of secrets had begun in earnest, and neither player yet understood how high the stakes would rise before the final moves were played. The second week of negotiations brought with it the oppressive heat of summer, when the Nile ran low and the very air seemed to shimmer with secrets. In the royal scriptorium, oil lamps burned late into the night as diplomatic discussions grew increasingly complex, requiring translations that demanded not merely linguistic skill, but cultural understanding that few possessed. Hatshepsut found herself spending countless hours in Suppiluliuma's presence, their work extending far beyond the formal sessions in the Great Hall. The Hittite delegation had been granted chambers in the palace's eastern wing, and it was there, in a smaller chamber, appointed with cedar tables and silk cushions, that the most delicate negotiations took place. The matter of mineral rights in the disputed territories requires careful consideration, Suppiluliuma observed, as he studied a map spread across the polished wood. His fingers traced the boundaries marked in red ink, and Hatshepsut noticed how those hands moved with the precision of someone accustomed to strategic planning. These copper mines have been a source of contention for generations. As she translated his words into the formal language of Egyptian diplomacy, Hatshepsut found herself studying his profile in the lamplight. There was something about the way he held himself, a natural authority that seemed to emanate from within, rather than being assumed for diplomatic purposes. When he gestured toward the map, his movements carried the unconscious grace of nobility, as if command were as natural to him as breathing. Your understanding of these territorial disputes is remarkably detailed, she ventured carefully, testing the boundaries of their professional relationship. Most trade negotiations focus on commercial routes rather than strategic resources. Suppiluliuma's grey-blue eyes met hers across the table, and she saw something flicker in their depths, a moment of calculation before he smiled with practiced diplomacy. A successful ambassador must understand all aspects of the territories he discusses. Commerce and strategy are often inseparable. Their conversations gradually expanded beyond the immediate demands of negotiation. As the nights grew longer and their work more intimate, they found themselves discussing the philosophical foundations of governance, the responsibilities of leadership, and the dreams that drove their respective civilizations toward greatness or destruction. Egypt has achieved something remarkable, Suppiluliuma said one evening as they worked by the light of a dozen oil lamps, their voices low in the sacred hush of night. Your people have created a civilization that endures not through conquest alone, but through the power of knowledge and culture. Hatshepsut felt her heart quicken at the genuine admiration in his voice. And yet, knowledge without wisdom can become a weapon as dangerous as any sword, she replied, her father's teachings echoing in her words. True strength lies in understanding when to use power and when to show restraint. She watched as he absorbed her words, his expression growing thoughtful in ways that seemed to reveal depths of character hidden beneath his diplomatic facade. There were moments when his careful composure slipped, revealing glimpses of a man wrestling with conflicts that went far beyond the complexities of trade agreements. You speak as if you understand the burden of difficult choices, he said quietly, his voice carrying an undertone of personal pain that made her wonder what secrets lay hidden behind his carefully maintained exterior. It was during one of these late-night sessions that Hatshepsut first noticed the inconsistencies that would later prove so significant. Suppiluliuma had excused himself briefly to retrieve additional documents from his chambers, and she found herself alone with the maps and correspondence that covered their working table. A piece of papyrus had fallen to the floor, and as she bent to retrieve it, her eyes caught sight of writing that made her blood run cold. The script was neither Egyptian nor the formal Hittite she had grown accustomed to translating, but something older and more complex, written in a hand that spoke of royal education and military precision. When Suppiluliuma returned, she was careful to give no sign of what she had observed, but her mind raced with questions that she dared not voice. Why would a trade ambassador carry correspondence in scripts reserved for the highest levels of government? What secrets lay hidden in documents that he took such care to keep from her sight? Her suspicions were further aroused by the quality of his personal possessions. Though he dressed simply for their working sessions, she had glimpsed items in his chambers that spoke of wealth and status far beyond what an ambassador might possess. A drinking cup of silver and gold that bore the intricate craftsmanship of royal artisans, a cloak pin set with gems that would have been worthy of a prince, weapons that showed the finest workmanship of Hittite smiths, their hilts worn smooth by hands accustomed to their use. Most telling of all was an incident that occurred during their 4th week of collaboration. They had been discussing the defensive capabilities of various Egyptian fortresses when Suppiluliuma made an observation that stopped her heart. The positioning of archers on the walls of Memphis fortress creates a vulnerability on the eastern approach, he said, pointing to a section of the map with the confidence of someone who had studied such matters extensively. A coordinated assault using siege towers and mobile shields could exploit that weakness effectively. The words hung in the air between them like a sword suspended by a thread. Hatshepsut felt her mouth go dry as she realized that no trade ambassador should possess such detailed knowledge of military tactics, much less the specific vulnerabilities of Egyptian defenses. "You seem remarkably well informed about siege warfare," she managed to say, her voice carefully neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. Suppiluliuma's eyes widened slightly as he realized what he had revealed, and she saw him struggle to find an explanation that would not raise further suspicions. "A diplomat must understand all aspects of the territories he visits," he said finally, but his tone lacked the easy confidence that usually characterized his speech. It was 3 nights later that fate intervened to shatter the careful boundaries that had contained their growing attraction. They were working late in the scriptorium, translating a particularly complex passage about water rights along the northern border, when the binding around Hatshepsut's chest began to loosen. She had been reaching across the table to retrieve a scroll when she felt the linen strips shift beneath her tunic. Panic flooded through her as she realized that her disguise was about to be catastrophically compromised. She moved quickly to adjust the binding, but not quickly enough to escape Suppiluliuma's sharp eyes. He had been watching her with the focused attention that had become habitual during their work sessions, and she saw the exact moment when confusion gave way to understanding in his expression. His eyes widened with shock, then narrowed with a mixture of fascination and something that might have been desire. "You are not what you appear to be," he said quietly, his voice carrying a note of wonder that made her heart race with terror and hope in equal measure. Hatshepsut felt the world tilt beneath her feet as 13 years of careful deception crumbled in the space of a heartbeat. She clutched her tunic closer to her body, her mind racing through possible explanations and finding none that would preserve her secret. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking with the weight of desperation. "You must not speak of this to anyone. My life depends upon your silence." Suppiluliuma rose from his chair and moved around the table with the fluid grace that had always marked his movements. When he stood before her, she could see the conflict playing out in his storm-colored eyes, the struggle between duty and something deeper that she dared not name. I suspected there was something unusual about you, he admitted, his voice soft in the lamplight. Your knowledge, your insights, the way you move and speak, no man I have ever known possesses such a combination of strength and grace. His hand reached out as if to touch her face, then stopped just short of contact, hovering in the space between them like a promise and a threat. What is your true name? Hatshepsut, she breathed, the syllables feeling strange on her lips after years of hiding behind masculine identity. Daughter of Thutmose, scribe and physician, servant of Egypt. The confession seemed to hang in the air between them, heavy with implications that neither fully understood. Suppiluliuma's eyes searched her face, as if seeing her for the first time, and she realized that her revelation had changed everything between them in ways that could never be undone. Hatshepsut, he repeated, her name sounding like a prayer in his deep voice. You have risked everything to serve your country. Such courage deserves honor, not condemnation. From that moment, their relationship transformed into something far more dangerous than professional collaboration. They began meeting in secret, finding hidden corners of the palace where they could speak freely without fear of discovery. The garden alcove behind the Temple of Thoth became their sanctuary, a place where moonlight filtered through date palms and the sound of fountains masked their whispered conversations. I have lived my entire adult life as a lie, Hatshepsut confessed during one of these clandestine meetings. Sometimes I forget who I truly am beneath the mask I wear for the world. Suppiluliuma's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that sent fire racing through her veins. I understand the burden of living a false life, he said quietly. There are aspects of my own identity that I cannot reveal, secrets that would destroy everything I have worked to achieve. Their shared vulnerability created a bond that transcended the careful boundaries of their assumed roles. In the safety of shadows and moonlight, they spoke of dreams that had been buried beneath duty, fears that haunted their sleepless nights, and the terrible loneliness that came from being unable to show their true selves to the world. What do you dream of when you allow yourself to dream? Suppiluliuma asked one night as they sat beside a lotus pool, their reflections wavering in the dark water. A world where knowledge belongs to all who seek it, Hatshepsut replied without hesitation. Where a woman's mind is valued as highly as her beauty, where healing and learning are not restricted by the accident of birth. His thumb traced across her knuckles in a caress so gentle it made her breath catch. Such dreams are dangerous in our world. All dreams worth having are dangerous, she whispered back, her eyes meeting his in the moonlight. But even as their emotional intimacy deepened, the outside world began to intrude upon their secret sanctuary. Nefertiti's suspicions had not been satisfied by her initial inquiries, and the court beauty had begun a more systematic investigation into Senenmut's background and behavior. She has been questioning the servants about your habits, Merit warned during one of their private conversations, asking about your family, your origins, why you never seem interested in the women who frequent the palace. Hatshepsut felt a chill of fear at this news. Nefertiti was not merely beautiful, but intelligent, and her jealousy over Suppiluliuma's apparent indifference to her charms had clearly motivated a dangerous curiosity about his preferences. What have you told her? Hatshepsut asked, though she trusted Merit's discretion implicitly. Nothing that could compromise you, Merit assured her. But others may not be so careful with their words. You must be more cautious, my child. The attention you have drawn threatens everything we have built. Similar warnings came from unexpected quarters. Amenemheb approached her one morning with an expression of paternal concern that made her realize how much the chief scribe had deduced about her true nature. Senenmut, he said carefully, using her assumed name, even though his eyes suggested he knew it was false. There are those in the court who have begun to take an unhealthy interest in your affairs. Perhaps it would be wise to maintain a lower profile during the remainder of the negotiations. Even Katie, the loyal guard who had always treated her with respectful distance, began appearing with suspicious frequency wherever she went. His scarred face bore an expression of protective vigilance that suggested he too had noticed the growing attention surrounding her. "There are dangers in the palace that go beyond the obvious," he warned her one evening as she made her way to another secret meeting with Suppiluliuma. "Not all threats come from foreign enemies. Sometimes the greatest danger lies in those who smile while they sharpen their knives." It was during this period of growing tension that the first cases of mysterious illness began to appear among the palace servants. Hatshepsut first became aware of the problem when Merit mentioned that 2 kitchen maids had fallen ill with symptoms that baffled the court physicians. "They burn with fever that no remedy can cool," Merit explained, her voice tight with worry. "And when the fever breaks, they speak of visions that make no sense, as if their minds have been touched by madness." Hatshepsut's medical training, inherited from her father's secret teachings, immediately recognized that these symptoms did not match any natural disease she had studied. The combination of high fever, followed by delirium, suggested poisoning rather than illness. But the specific pattern was unlike anything in her father's extensive notes. "How many have been affected?" she asked, her scholarly mind already analyzing the implications. "7 so far," Merit replied grimly, "and the number grows with each passing day." When Hatshepsut mentioned the spreading illness to Suppiluliuma during one of their meetings, she was struck by the genuine concern that crossed his features. His reaction seemed too authentic to be feigned, and she found herself wondering why a foreign ambassador would care so deeply about the health of Egyptian servants. "Such symptoms suggest something beyond natural causes," he observed, his voice heavy with worry. "In my travels, I have encountered similar illnesses in regions where water supplies have been contaminated by those who wish harm to local populations." Yet his knowledge of such matters was both helpful and troubling, adding another layer to the growing mystery of his true identity and purpose. But Hatshepsut found herself trusting his concern, recognizing in his expression the same dedication to human welfare that had driven her father's medical practice. Meanwhile, the pressure of his secret mission was beginning to take its toll on Suppiluliuma's composure. She noticed that he had grown increasingly restless during their formal negotiation sessions, and there were times when she caught him staring into the distance with an expression of profound conflict. Late one night, as she made her way to their usual meeting place, she glimpsed him in his chambers through a partially open door. He was bent over a table covered with documents, but these were not the trade agreements and territorial maps that dominated their official work. Instead, she saw detailed drawings of palace layouts, guard rotations, and defensive positions that could only have been created for military purposes. Her heart stopped as she realized the implications of what she was witnessing. The man she had come to love, the person who had become the center of her secret world, was systematically gathering intelligence that could be used to attack Egypt. As if sensing her presence, Suppiluliuma looked up from his work, and their eyes met across the lamplight. In that moment, she saw the full weight of his internal struggle reflected in his expression, the terrible conflict between duty and desire that was tearing him apart. "Hatshepsut," he said quietly, her name carrying a note of pain that made her heart ache, even as her mind recoiled from the evidence of his betrayal. But before either could speak further, the sound of approaching footsteps forced her to retreat into the shadows, leaving behind questions that would soon demand answers that might destroy everything they had built together. The following evening brought the culmination of weeks of growing tension and desire. They met in the Temple of Isis, where moonlight streamed through columns carved with images of the goddess of love and magic. The air was heavy with incense and the weight of unspoken truths that could no longer be contained. "I cannot continue this deception," Suppiluliuma said, as they stood facing each other in the sacred space. My feelings for you have grown beyond anything I thought possible, and I find myself torn between loyalties that should never have come into conflict." Hatshepsut felt her heart racing as she recognized the moment of truth that had been building between them for weeks. "And I can no longer pretend that my interest in you is merely professional," she whispered back. "You have awakened something in me that I thought had died with my father's dreams." He stepped closer, his hand reaching up to cup her face with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "Whatever secrets lie between us, whatever dangers we face, I need you to know that my love for you is the only truth I have left." Oh, when his lips met hers, the kiss was everything she had dreamed and feared it would be. Gentle at first, then deeper as years of loneliness and longing poured out between them. His arms encircled her with a strength that made her feel both protected and vulnerable, while her hands tangled in his bronze-colored hair as if she could anchor herself to this moment forever. But even as they lost themselves in the passion that had been building between them for weeks, the shadows of their respective deceptions loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. The mysterious illness continued to spread through the palace, claiming new victims with each passing day, while the evidence of Suppiluliuma's secret activities burned in Hatshepsut's memory like a brand. As they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily in the moonlight, Hatshepsut realized that their love had been born in a garden of lies that would soon demand a harvest of truth that might destroy them both. The moonlight that had cradled Hatshepsut in Suppiluliuma's arms now seemed to mock her, casting long, accusing shadows across the palace. Her heart, which only moments before had soared with a forbidden love, plummeted into an abyss of ice as she stared at the military map. The lines were too precise, the markings too strategic, the notes in a script she now recognized as Suppiluliuma's own, detailing Egyptian defenses with chilling accuracy. This was no mere ambassador's idle curiosity. This was the work of a spy, a strategist, an enemy preparing to strike. Her world, so carefully constructed over 13 years, shattered into 1,000 fragments around her. The man who had touched her soul, who had seen past her disguise, was systematically gathering intelligence to bring her nation to its knees. The betrayal cut deeper than any blade, searing her very essence. How could such a profound connection, such a shared intimacy of mind and spirit, be rooted in so cruel a deception? Was every tender glance, every shared whispered dream, a calculated maneuver? A wave of nausea swept over her, threatening to buckle her knees. She sank onto a nearby bench, the parchment clutched in her trembling hands. Merit, her faithful shadow and the keeper of her deepest secret, found her there, illuminated only by the faint glow filtering from the scriptorium. The older woman's eyes, wise and ancient, immediately sensed the shift in the air, the profound despair emanating from Hatshepsut. She knelt, her calloused hand gently touching Hatshepsut's shoulder. "Child, what troubles you so?" Merit's voice was a soft balm, yet the tremor in Hatshepsut's hands was undeniable as she revealed the map. Merit's gaze hardened as she understood. Her eyes, filled with years of loyalty and shared burdens, now reflected a pain as deep as Hatshepsut's own. The foreign prince, he is not what he seems. It was not a question, but a grim confirmation. Merit simply held her, allowing the silent tears to fall, a shared agony of shattered trust and impending doom. Hatshepsut felt torn, as if her very being was being ripped in two. One half screamed for the love she had found, the other cried out for the homeland she swore to protect. Duty, like the heavy gold on a pharaoh's crown, pressed down, demanding an impossible sacrifice. She had to confront him. The truth, however bitter, demanded to be spoken. She found Suppiluliuma in his chambers, a solitary figure illuminated by a single oil lamp, poring over more scrolls, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sight of him, so utterly familiar, yet now utterly alien, twisted her gut. She entered without a sound, the incriminating map held openly in her hand. He looked up, his storm-colored eyes, usually so warm and perceptive, widening as they fixed on the papyrus. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Surprise, recognition, perhaps even a flash of guilt, before his features settled into a mask of carefully constructed composure. But Hatshepsut knew him too well now. She saw the minute tightening around his eyes, the almost imperceptible clenching of his jaw. "Is this part of your diplomatic mission, Lord Suppiluliuma?" Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely holding the torrent of emotions raging within her. The formal title, once a playful mockery of their roles, now felt like a curse. He rose slowly, moving toward her with that fluid grace that had once captivated her, but now felt menacing. "Hatshepsut," he began, his voice low, a plea woven into the single syllable of her name. "Do not use my name," she hissed, recoiling as he reached out. "Not when your hands are stained with such treachery. You came here not for peace, but for war. Not as an ambassador, but as a spy." She thrust the map at him, the paper crinkling under the force of her accusation. "This is not the work of a trade negotiator. This is a blueprint for invasion." He took the map, his gaze falling to the detailed drawings, the vulnerable points of Egyptian fortresses, the precise movements of chariots, the notes on troop deployment. A heavy silence descended, broken only by the frantic beat of her own heart. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a depth of conflict that mirrored her own. "You speak the truth, Hatshepsut," he confessed, his voice heavy with a pain that sounded shockingly genuine. "I am Suppiluliuma, crown prince of the Hittite Empire. And yes, I came here on a mission to gather intelligence, to assess Egypt's strengths and weaknesses." He took a step closer, his hands open in a gesture of desperate sincerity. "But my feelings for you, they are no lie. They are the only truth I have found in this labyrinth of deceit." Her breath hitched. She wanted to believe him, oh, how she wanted to believe that desperate plea in his eyes. But the evidence was cold, hard, undeniable. "How can I believe you?" she cried, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. Every word, every shared moment, every stolen kiss, was it all part of the charade? "No." His voice was a guttural plea, raw with desperation. "Never. I swear to you, by the gods of my people and yours, I never intended for this. When I met you, everything changed. My duty became a torment. I have fought against it, Hatshepsut, against what I was sent to do because of you." He reached for her, his touch a gentle caress on her arm. "Come with me. Let us abandon this life, these crowns, these empires that demand our souls. We can disappear, find a place where our love can be free." The temptation was a burning ember in her heart, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. To escape, to be with the man she loved, far from the suffocating demands of duty and the perilous weight of her secret. But then the faces of the palace servants, fever-ridden and delirious, flashed before her eyes. "The plague," she whispered, the words forming a new accusation. "Is this also part of your design? To weaken Egypt from within before your armies strike?" A shadow of genuine horror crossed his features, dispelling the last vestiges of her doubt that he was truly shocked. "The plague. What plague? I know nothing of this. My mission was to gather intelligence, to map your defenses, not to unleash pestilence." His eyes were wide with a terror that seemed utterly authentic. "The illness you spoke of in the gardens, it has spread?" The intensity of his reaction, the sheer disbelief and genuine revulsion in his voice struck her. He truly did not know. This was a new, far more sinister layer to the conspiracy. Her medical mind, though reeling from the emotional devastation, instantly shifted focus. Driven by a renewed sense of purpose that transcended her personal heartbreak, Hatshepsut returned to the investigation of the mysterious illness. The palace, once a vibrant tapestry of life, now echoed with the moans of the sick and the hushed whispers of fear. She immersed herself in her father's ancient medical texts, their familiar scent a grim comfort. Night and day she studied symptoms, cross-referenced remedies, and observed the terrifying progression of the disease. Working alongside Horus, the venerable court physician, she pieced together the puzzle. Horus, a man of profound wisdom but limited by traditional methods, was baffled. The humours are unbalanced, Senenmut, yet no known fever behaves like this. The visions, the madness, it is as if their souls are poisoned. Hatshepsut, applying her father's holistic and often unorthodox teachings, recognized a chilling pattern. The illness seemed to afflict specific groups of people, particularly those who frequented certain parts of the palace, especially servants, cooks and guards who drank from specific cisterns or ate from particular kitchens. The disease was not natural. It was a calculated, insidious attack. The poison was being introduced through the palace's water supply, subtly contaminating the lifeblood of the royal court. This was not a plague of the gods, but a meticulously planned act of war. As Hatshepsut worked, the political climate in the palace grew thick with suspicion, a palpable tension hanging in the air like the humidity before a storm. Nefertiti, her coal-lined eyes gleaming with a malicious satisfaction, saw Hatshepsut's distraction and vulnerability as an opportunity. She began openly questioning Senenmut's loyalty, his extended absences, his peculiar focus on the servants' maladies. Her whispers echoed through the court. Who is this scribe, truly? What secrets does he hide? Why does he consort with foreigners and ignore the duties of his station? The court divided. Some, fearing Nefertiti's influence, distanced themselves. Others, like Amenemheb, the ever-watchful chief of scribes, moved subtly to protect Hatshepsut. He provided her with access to palace blueprints, ancient records of water conduits, and historical accounts of past sieges, all under the guise of research for the negotiations. He knew, though he never said it aloud, that something far more dangerous was at play, and Hatshepsut was at its heart. Pharaoh Thutmose II, weighed down by the burdens of his office and the spreading illness, found himself in an impossible dilemma. He trusted Senenmut's intellect, but the whispers were growing louder, demanding an investigation. His gaze often fell upon Hatshepsut during court sessions, a mixture of concern and growing doubt clouding his features. He needed answers, but whom could he truly trust? Through it all, Katie, the loyal guard captain, remained a steadfast, silent presence. He subtly redirected suspicious eyes, cleared paths for Hatshepsut, and ensured her movements went largely unnoticed by those who sought to harm her. His scarred face remained impassive, but his vigilance was a protective shield around her, an unspoken promise of support. He had witnessed the young scribe's dedication, and his warrior's instinct told him Hatshepsut fought for Egypt, not against it. The terrifying truth crystallized in Hatshepsut's mind like ice on the Nile. The plague was indeed artificial, a slow-acting poison, meticulously calculated to debilitate the palace without immediate detection. The Hittite connection was undeniable. The military intelligence gathered by Suppiluliuma was not merely for a future invasion, but to target the palace's most vulnerable points, its life-sustaining water sources. But as she delved deeper, she unearthed a chilling detail. The specific poison, its method of administration, and the intricate timing suggested a level of conspiracy that extended beyond a simple ambassadorial mission. It was a deeper plot, devised by a hardline faction within the Hittite court, working in concert with certain discontented Egyptian traitors who sought to overthrow Pharaoh Thutmose and install a puppet ruler. Suppiluliuma, she realized with a sickening lurch, had been a pawn in a game far larger and more brutal than even he had understood. When she confronted him with this new, terrifying evidence, he recoiled, his face pale with genuine horror. A poison, a true plague, but how? He paced his chambers, his strong hands running through his bronze hair, his aristocratic composure utterly shattered. My father, our king, would never sanction such barbarity. This is the work of the Iron Faction, those who seek total domination, not merely strategic advantage. They must have acted without his knowledge, using my mission as cover. His words carried the ring of truth. Hatshepsut saw the conflict in his eyes, the profound revulsion for the deed, and the dawning realization that he, too, had been manipulated, his noble mission twisted into a weapon of mass suffering. The deep, agonizing betrayal she felt now had another layer, the heartbreak of watching the man she loved discover he had unwittingly served a monstrous cause. A desperate race against time began. Hatshepsut, armed with the horrifying truth, needed to find an antidote, and fast. Her father's medical scrolls provided the clues, but the ingredients were rare, precious, some locked away in the highly guarded royal apothecaries, accessible only to the highest court physicians. To acquire them, she would have to abandon her disguise, reveal herself, and risk everything. It was a personal sacrifice that tore at her soul, but the lives of her people, the very fate of Egypt, depended on it. "I need access to the royal stores," she told Merit, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "The specific antivenom requires compounds found only there. It means they will know." Merit, tears glistening in her old eyes, nodded. "Then they shall know the woman who saved them." Even in this darkest hour, an unlikely alliance formed. Suppiluliuma, his face etched with remorse, offered his help, knowing full well it would brand him a traitor in the eyes of the hardline Hittites he had once served. "I will help you, whatever it takes. My father must know of this treachery. My honor and my love for you demands it." He provided crucial intelligence on the inner workings of the conspiracy, the names of the Egyptian traitors, the precise schedule of the poison's administration. Merit, with her deep connections among the palace servants, discreetly gathered preliminary ingredients and information. Amenemheb, sensing the urgency and the truth in Hatshepsut's quiet intensity, provided her with the necessary access codes and clearances for the royal chambers, feigning routine administrative tasks. And Katie, ever vigilant, ensured that their covert movements through the palace halls went unobserved, his presence a silent shield against prying eyes. Working frantically within the guarded medical chambers, Hatshepsut and Suppiluliuma toiled side by side. His hands, once those of a warrior, now carefully ground herbs and measured compounds, following her precise instructions. The air was thick with the scent of potent remedies and the silent hum of their desperate concentration. Each shared glance was a testament to their fractured yet unbreakable bond, a silent conversation of love, betrayal, and a desperate hope for redemption. Just as Hatshepsut reached for the final, critical ingredient, her hand brushed against Suppiluliuma's, and a jolt of electricity passed between them, a fleeting reminder of the passion that had brought them to this perilous precipice. At that precise moment, the heavy door to the medical chamber swung open with a resounding thud. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the flickering torchlight, was Nefertiti, her face a mask of triumphant fury, flanked by two imposing palace guards. Her coal-lined eyes widened, not in fear, but in vicious satisfaction as she took in the scene. Senenmut, the mysterious scribe, caught red-handed with the Hittite prince, surrounded by maps and suspicious compounds. "Traitors!" Nefertiti's voice, usually a melodic whisper, now rang through the chamber, sharp and piercing. "I knew it! They conspire against Egypt. Arrest them!" The guards moved swiftly, their bronze armlets glinting in the dim light. Hatshepsut instinctively shielded the incomplete antidote, her heart pounding with a terror that transcended fear for herself. The cure was almost ready, but it was not enough. They were caught. Both were arrested, their hands bound, the crucial antidote still unfinished, and the cries of the sick echoing through the palace, a grim symphony of their impending doom. The heavy silence that fell upon Hatshepsut and Suppiluliuma as the palace guards, under Nefertiti's triumphant gaze, seized them, was more crushing than any chains. The raw scent of fear, mingled with the potent aroma of the incomplete antidote, hung in the air. Each beat of Hatshepsut's heart was a drum of impending doom, not for herself, but for the countless lives hanging in the balance, for the kingdom she had fought so desperately to save. Their hands, still tingling from that last, desperate touch, were pulled apart, a cruel severing of their forbidden connection. They were dragged through the labyrinthine corridors, the frantic cries of the plague-stricken echoing faintly from distant chambers, a haunting symphony of their failure. Finally, they were brought before Pharaoh Thutmose, seated upon his gilded throne, his face etched with exhaustion and profound disillusionment. The court had assembled, a sea of anxious faces, whispering, pointing, eager to witness the unfolding drama. Nefertiti, positioned near the throne, basked in the spotlight, a cruel smile playing on her lips, convinced of her victory. Senenmut. Pharaoh's voice, usually rich with authority, was thin with sorrow. What is the meaning of this outrage, discovered in the royal medical chambers with a foreign prince, surrounded by this? His gesture encompassed the maps and vials presented as evidence. Speak, explain this treachery. Hatshepsut looked at the faces around her, the suspicion in the courtier's eyes, the veiled triumph in Nefertiti's, the profound weariness in Pharaoh's. This was the moment. The truth, however perilous, must finally be unleashed. She drew a deep breath, feeling the phantom pressure of her chest binding, a disguise that had served its purpose but must now be shed. Your Majesty, she began, her voice usually deepened for effect, now resonated with an authentic clarity that silenced the murmurs. I stand accused of treason, but my only crime, if it is one, has been to serve Egypt with every fibre of my being, even at the cost of my very identity. With a slow, deliberate movement, Hatshepsut reached for the hidden clasps of her scribe's tunic, her fingers trembling slightly. Merit, watching from the periphery, clasped her hands to her mouth, a tear escaping her ancient eyes. As the linen fell away, revealing the tightly bound linen beneath, and then, as she pulled at the binding, allowing her true form to emerge, a collective gasp rippled through the hall. The disguise, her shield for 13 years, disintegrated, revealing the undeniable curves of a woman. Her long, dark hair, previously concealed by her scribe's cap, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her face, devoid of its masculine sternness, now shone with a raw, undeniable femininity. A gasp of shock, followed by a roar of disbelief, erupted from the assembled court. "A woman!" someone bellowed. "The royal scribe is a woman?" Nefertiti's eyes widened, her triumphant smile faltering, replaced by a look of sheer, incandescent fury. Her scheme had uncovered a truth far more shocking than she had anticipated, a truth that shifted the ground beneath her own feet. Hatshepsut, no longer Senenmut, stood before them, exposed but unbowed. "I am Hatshepsut," she declared, her voice ringing with a strength she had never permitted herself. "Daughter of Thutmose, the royal scribe and physician, and I stand before you, not as a traitor, but as the only one who can save Egypt from a far greater treachery." The trial was a maelstrom of accusations and desperate defenses. Nefertiti, recovering her composure, launched into a venomous tirade, painting Hatshepsut as a cunning seductress and a dangerous deceiver, using her feminine wiles to betray the pharaoh and the kingdom. "She has misled your Majesty for years. Corrupted by foreign influence, she now plots with this Hittite to bring us to ruin." Suppiluliuma, standing tall beside Hatshepsut, his face devoid of fear, interjected, his voice cutting through Nefertiti's venom like a sword. "The Lady Nefertiti speaks of corruption, but her words are poisoned by jealousy, not truth. I am Suppiluliuma, Prince of the Hittite Empire. And I take full responsibility for my presence here, but I swear, by all the gods, that Hatshepsut is innocent of any treachery against Egypt." His gaze, filled with an unwavering love, met hers, a silent pact forged in the crucible of their imminent demise. My mission was indeed to gather intelligence, a grave error I regret deeply, but I swear upon my very soul that my love for this woman is true, and she has always fought for Egypt, even when it meant fighting against me." Hatshepsut, feeling the profound strength of his declaration, presented her evidence. With the incomplete antidote in her trembling hands, she explained the nature of the plague, the insidious poison, and the method of its silent spread through the palace's water supply. She detailed her father's forgotten texts, the ancient knowledge of healing that had guided her, and the desperate race against time to formulate a cure. Then, one by one, her loyal allies stepped forward. Amenemheb, his silver beard gleaming, approached the throne. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice filled with a lifetime of unwavering service, "I have known Senenmut for 13 years. His dedication, his intellect, his unwavering loyalty have never been in doubt. This scribe has brought honor to our scriptorium and saved countless lives with her wisdom." His eyes, filled with a paternal pride and deep sorrow, met Hatshepsut's, a silent apology for his past suspicions and a firm promise of support now. Merit, defying all court protocol, pushed through the crowd, her face a testament to years of quiet devotion. "Your Majesty," her voice, though raspy with age, resonated with an undeniable authority. "I was with Hatshepsut since her birth. I know her heart. Her father, a great healer, taught her secrets few men possess. She has used those secrets only for good. This plague, only she can cure it." Her words, simple yet profound, carried the weight of a lifetime of truth. Finally, Katie, the imposing guard captain, stepped forward, his scarred face grim, his bearing radiating an unshakable conviction. "Your Majesty, I have observed Senenmut's movements. I have seen the strange illness take hold of our guards, our loyal servants. This scribe has worked tirelessly, even when others turned away. If there is a traitor, it is not Hatshepsut." His words, from a man of action and few words, carried immense weight. The revelation of the conspiracy by Suppiluliuma shattered the last illusions. He exposed the hardliner faction within his own court, detailing their clandestine alliance with ambitious Egyptian traitors who sought to overthrow Pharaoh Thutmose and install a puppet ruler, using the plague as a grotesque prelude to invasion. The horror of the plot sent a cold shiver through the court, eclipsing the initial shock of Hatshepsut's identity. Pharaoh Thutmose, his face a mask of shock and dawning understanding, looked from the evidence to the unwavering gaze of Hatshepsut, then to the repentant but resolute Suppiluliuma, and finally to the faces of his most loyal servants, their eyes pleading for justice and salvation. The truth, harsh and painful, was undeniable. Hatshepsut knew her choice. There was no escaping it. The antidote, now within her grasp, demanded her sacrifice. She chose Egypt. She chose her people. She chose the legacy of her father. And in that choice, she chose to relinquish the man who had become the very breath of her existence. Working feverishly with Horus, who now saw her not as a scribe, but as a true healer, Hatshepsut completed the antidote. The palace buzzed with a new kind of energy, one of hope and desperation. Hour by hour, she personally administered the remedy, moving from chamber to chamber, her feminine grace replaced by the focused intensity of a true physician. The results were immediate, miraculous. The fever broke, the madness receded, and life, precious and fragile, began to return to the faces of the afflicted. But her triumph was bittersweet. The price of salvation was her love. Suppiluliuma's escape was orchestrated with a heartbreaking efficiency. Katie, his face a stoic mask, led him through secret passages. Amenemheb, his eyes heavy with sorrow, granted them passage through the palace gates. Their farewell was silent, a searing gaze exchanged across a moonlit courtyard, a promise of eternal, impossible love hanging heavy in the cool night air. He was gone, a phantom of what might have been, and with him went a piece of her soul. The personal cost was immense, watching the man who held her heart disappear into the vast, unknown desert, possibly forever. The aftermath was a delicate dance of political maneuvers. Hatshepsut, hailed as a hero by the rescued populace, was, by strict decree, stripped of her position as royal scribe. A woman could not hold such an office, nor could she be seen to defy the traditional order so openly, yet Pharaoh Thutmose, indebted and profoundly grateful, ensured her secret respect. She was granted a generous pension and a discreet, secluded residence outside the immediate confines of the court. Her official downfall was, in reality, her quiet ascent. The Hittite invasion was thwarted, the conspirators within Egypt exposed and punished, and the kingdom, though wounded, emerged stronger and more united. Nefertiti, her scheme backfiring spectacularly, found herself ostracized, her beauty no longer enough to command the attention of a court that had witnessed her malicious nature. Her star dimmed, her influence waned, leaving her to fester in her own bitter defeat. In the quiet solitude of her new life, Hatshepsut found a different kind of purpose. With Merit as her faithful assistant, she established an underground network, a secret school for educating young women, teaching them not only to read and write, but also the principles of healing and diplomacy. It was a silent revolution, nurturing minds that the world sought to keep confined. Amenemheb, though unable to openly acknowledge her, subtly directed noble families seeking intellectual guidance for their daughters to her, ensuring her quiet influence spread like the fertile silt of the Nile. Katie, his loyalty unwavering, became her silent protector, ensuring the safety of her school and its hidden students, his scarred presence a comforting beacon in the shadows. She found a profound satisfaction in empowering other women, healing from her heartbreak through service, cultivating a garden of knowledge where before there had been only desert. 10 years later, the sands of time had shifted, carrying with them whispers of change from across the known world. A diplomatic envoy arrived from the Hittite Empire, bearing a proposal of unprecedented peace, and with it, a letter for Hatshepsut. Her heart, long dormant, stirred with a familiar ache as she recognized the strong, decisive hand that penned the ancient script. It was from Suppiluliuma. He was now king of the Hittites, having spent a decade meticulously reforming his kingdom, weeding out the hardliner faction that had engineered the plague and pursued aggressive expansion. He proposed not merely a treaty, but a union, a genuine, lasting peace between their nations. And in words that made her breath catch, a personal invitation. He asked her to be his queen, to stand by his side, to unite their kingdoms not through conquest, but through love and shared vision. His revelation that he had worked tirelessly to undo the damage of his past, to create a kingdom worthy of her, filled her with a profound, almost overwhelming joy. The decision was not easy. 10 years had forged her into a leader, a teacher, a quiet force for change in Egypt. Could she abandon her life's work, the women who looked to her for guidance, for a dream that had once seemed impossible? Merit, her eyes brimming with a mother's love, encouraged her. Follow your heart, child. True purpose can be found anywhere, and love like that is a gift from the gods. Amenemheb, wise as ever, counseled political wisdom. A union such as this could bring peace for generations, and Hatshepsut, a queen who understands diplomacy and healing, Egypt would only benefit. Katie, his silent support unwavering, simply stated, "You fight for Egypt, Hatshepsut. Be where you are needed most." She chose a middle path, one that honored both her love and her life's work. She accepted the alliance, but on her terms. The negotiation was hers alone. She demanded not only a just and lasting peace between their nations, but also, as a condition of their union, the establishment of formal rights for women in both kingdoms, including access to education and positions of influence. The wedding was a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur, a merging of two mighty empires. All her loyal friends were there. Amenemheb, his face beaming with pride, appointed as chief diplomatic advisor to the newly united kingdoms. Merit, her joy overflowing, placed at the head of the new international women's education program, fulfilling Hatshepsut's lifelong dream, and Katie, his presence a testament to unwavering loyalty, named captain of the Joint Royal Guard, protecting a new era of peace. In the final scene, years later, their kingdom thrived under their united rule, a beacon of wisdom and prosperity. The international women's education program flourished, drawing eager minds from across the ancient world. Hatshepsut and Suppiluliuma, their faces etched with the lines of time and shared experience, still worked side by side, poring over scrolls, not of war, but of progressive laws, of educational reforms, their hands often finding each other across the papyrus-laden table. Their love, forged in deception and tested by betrayal, had emerged stronger, purer, a testament to enduring connection. Their story became legend, passed down through generations, inspiring all who heard it. And even Nefertiti, humbled by time and the undeniable triumph of Hatshepsut's legacy, eventually became a quiet supporter of the very schools she once scorned, proving that even the hardest hearts could, in time, be softened by the power of knowledge and compassion. The final image of Hatshepsut, elderly but radiant, teaching young women to read, with Suppiluliuma watching, a proud and loving light in his eyes, stood as a monument to their extraordinary journey, a life where love, wisdom and purpose were perfectly balanced, forever etched into the annals of time. 2 years had woven themselves into the rich tapestry of time since the grand wedding that united two ancient empires, Egypt and Hatti, under an unprecedented banner of peace. The palace of Memphis, once a crucible of intrigue and whispered treachery, now hummed with a different energy, one of vibrant exchange, burgeoning trade, and the joyous laughter of children echoing through its sun-drenched courtyards. Pharaoh Hatshepsut and King Suppiluliuma reigned not as conquerors, but as visionaries, their love story, once a clandestine secret, now openly celebrated as the very foundation of this new era. In the private garden alcove that had once been their sanctuary of whispered confessions, Hatshepsut often found Suppiluliuma at dusk, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Their hands would find each other, fingers intertwining, a silent language spoken between souls that had journeyed through darkness to find an enduring light. Their love, forged in the fires of deception and betrayal, had not only endured, but had deepened, matured like the finest wine. It was a love built not on naive passion, but on unwavering respect, shared purpose, and the profound understanding that only those who have truly risked everything can possess. There were moments, fleeting glances across crowded council chambers, a gentle brush of his thumb against her cheek as he handed her a scroll, a shared, knowing smile when a particularly complex diplomatic solution found its resolution in their combined wisdom that spoke volumes of a connection far beyond mere royal duty. Their passion was no longer a frantic, stolen thing, but a quiet, steady flame, warming their shared existence. A year after their unification, the heavens had blessed their union with the arrival of a daughter, Neferu-Ra. Her name, meaning beauty of Ra, was a testament to the radiant hope she brought into their lives. She possessed her mother's sharp, inquisitive eyes and her father's bronze-colored hair, a living embodiment of the two cultures harmoniously entwined. Hatshepsut, who had once believed her life's path lay solely in scholarship and secret service, found an unexpected, boundless joy in motherhood. Watching Suppiluliuma, the formidable warrior king, tenderly cradle their daughter, murmuring Hittite lullabies mixed with Egyptian blessings, filled her heart with a profound sense of completeness. They spoke often of their shared past, of the secrets they had kept, and of the immense price paid for their love. But those memories no longer carried the sting of regret. They were testaments to the strength of their bond, reminders of how far they had come. The transformation across their lands was palpable. The women's schools, once a clandestine network, were now openly funded and revered institutions in both Egypt and Hatti. Merit, her eyes twinkling with fierce pride, bustled through the grand halls of the Central Academy in Memphis. Her voice, though older, still vibrant as she guided young women, daughters of scribes and nobles, merchants and farmers, through the complexities of writing, mathematics, and even governance. "Knowledge is freedom, my dears," she would often declare, her words echoing Hatshepsut's own philosophy. The first generation of women, scribes, physicians, and even diplomatic aides, were already beginning to make their mark, their presence a quiet revolution, changing the very fabric of society. Amenemheb, his silver beard now almost pure white, sat contentedly in his expanded chambers, overseeing a growing corps of diplomatic scribes who facilitated communication across the newly integrated regions. He trained young men and women alike, instilling in them the same dedication to truth and nuance that Hatshepsut had exemplified. His quiet satisfaction was evident in every thoughtful nod, every gentle correction he offered. He had lived to see his most gifted student, the woman he had secretly protected, ascend to a throne, forging a peace he had only dreamed of. Trade routes, once fraught with danger and suspicion, now flourished. Egyptian grain flowed freely to Hittite cities, while Hittite metalwork and timber enriched the markets of the Nile. The prosperity, built on mutual respect rather than conquest, had brought an unprecedented era of stability. Katie, now captain of the Joint Royal Guard, his scarred face bearing a rare, contented smile, commanded a force of both Egyptian and Hittite soldiers, their loyalties intertwined under the new dual crown. He still made frequent discreet visits to Hatshepsut's academies, his towering presence a silent guardian, a comforting reminder that the seeds of peace were being protected by those who understood its cost. And Nefertiti, the court beauty who had almost undone Hatshepsut's world, had indeed paid a significant price. Her influence had withered, her alliances crumbled, and her name, once synonymous with beauty and power, was now whispered with a note of pity. She had retreated from the public eye, fading into the comfortable obscurity of her family estates. Yet, the seeds of change, once scorned, had subtly begun to sprout even within her. Hatshepsut heard whispers from Amenemheb that Nefertiti had quietly, anonymously donated a considerable sum to a new girls' school in a distant province. It was not a grand public gesture, but a small, undeniable acknowledgement of a shift within her, a silent concession to the power of the legacy Hatshepsut had built. Perhaps, Hatshepsut mused, even the coldest of hearts could eventually be warmed by the light of wisdom. As Hatshepsut held Neferurar in her arms one evening, watching Suppiluliuma oversee the final preparations for a new treaty, she felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been long, fraught with danger, filled with the sharp edges of betrayal and the bitter taste of sacrifice. She had walked a path few had dared, paid a price few could comprehend, but looking at her daughter, a living symbol of a future intertwined, and at Suppiluliuma, her partner in love and reign, she knew it was all worth it. Their story, once a solitary struggle for survival, had become an epic, whispered across generations, a testament to the enduring power of love, the relentless pursuit of knowledge, and the triumph of a heart that dared to break ancient molds. The legacy they forged was not just in stone and papyrus, but in the boundless potential of every mind, every spirit, now free to soar under the eternal sun of Egypt and Hatti. And so, our epic journey through the sands of ancient Egypt comes to a close. We have witnessed the triumphs and heartbreaks of Hatshepsut and Suppiluliuma, two souls bound by destiny and forged in the crucible of a world desperate for change. Theirs is a tale that reminds us of the extraordinary courage it takes to live authentically, even when society demands a mask. It teaches us that true strength lies not in the sword, but in the power of knowledge, in the unwavering pursuit of truth, and in the relentless conviction to do what is right, no matter the personal cost. Their love, born in secrecy and tested by betrayal, ultimately proved that even across the deepest divides, harmony can blossom. It showed us that understanding and compassion can build bridges stronger than any fortress, uniting nations and transforming enemies into allies. Hatshepsut's legacy, built on wisdom and compassion, reminds us that true power lies in empowering others, in nurturing minds, and in fighting for a future where every voice, every talent can shine brightest. And Suppiluliuma's journey, from dutiful prince to compassionate king, proves that even those burdened by the gravest responsibilities can find redemption through love and unwavering integrity. Their story, etched into the very fabric of time, reminds us that the human spirit, resilient and boundless, is capable of overcoming the most formidable obstacles. It is a beacon of hope, inspiring us to believe in the possibility of a world where love, honor, and progress walk hand in hand. What did you feel as you watched their extraordinary saga unfold? What moments stirred your soul? We are so eager to hear your thoughts, your emotions, your insights into this unforgettable tale. Please share your comments below. And if you stayed with us until the very end, proving your dedication to these timeless narratives, type the word legacy in your comment. It helps us know who our most devoted viewers are and ensures we can continue to bring you stories that move your heart. If Hatshepsut and Suppiluliuma's journey captivated you, be sure to check out our other captivating tales of love, courage, and destiny. We have many more historical romances waiting to sweep you away into forgotten eras. You will find them all linked in the cards above and in the description below. Until next time, may your own journey be filled with as much love, wisdom, and triumph as theirs.